This is a video from a recent Pride March in New York, and I'm interested in your view of it.
So I have a few points on this. The first point is that it is an unfortunate reality, and I'm not going to be called a bigot. I'm going to talk about the reality that the homosexual community cannot reproduce in and of themselves. So for them to have a community into the future, they do need your children. That's how they think. For there to be a homosexual community in 100 years from now, they need straight people's kids, because only straight people have children. So they're telling the truth. That's the first thing. They mean what they say. The second thing is, I think a lot of this is an attention grab by them. I think they are slightly disappointed in how tolerant many people actually are. I have no problem with gay people. I don't care. I'm gay. Cool. I want to get married. Fine. I'm going to wave my dick in your kid's face. Wait a second.
Yeah.
They push it to a point where we have to react. And then when we react, they say we're bigoted. Children are innocent, and destruction of innocence is one of the most disgusting things on the face of the planet. It's terrible if a child is killed in a war. It's terrible if a child's mind is warped by any propaganda mechanism. They're innocent. What I don't understand is why, imagine heterosexual men walked around naked saying we're coming for the children.
Well, someone gets shot.
Absolutely. So why is it when
For good reason.
Completely. So as soon as there's this sexual orientation, they're completely protected. And I think that the whole point of having children as a whole is to instill them with your worldview. I know if I have children, I want them to be like me. We just talked about my last name and how I want them to honor me into post-death. Then I want them to be a representation of me, which means they should believe in my values and my creeds. Why is a group of people in New York walking around telling me what they're going to teach my kids and what my kids should believe? They're not your kids, they're my kids.
Right.
And that's what's so scary, because children are impressionable and children are raised by the state and the internet effectively, which is why they want me off the internet. But they'll let a lot of people stay on the internet that say a lot about a lot of things. I'll argue that if I was transgender, the American embassy would have told Romania they were bigoted and removed me pretty quickly. I would genuinely argue that point. They would say, no, what you're doing is abusive to the LGBT community. He must be removed from jail.
Of course, immediately.
Immediately. But because I'm straight and heterosexual, it doesn't matter. We're the class that suffers the biggest bigotry that possibly exists in the Western world today. I would actually argue that point. But they're saying this to be deliberately provocative. They're deliberately trying to upset people. They want to upset you so that when you talk against it, they can call you names and call you a bigot. And also they mean what they say. And it's truly scary. I'm obviously a Muslim. I'm Islamic. What most people don't understand about a lot of the Islamic world is that a lot of these things are outlawed, right? But people say, so gay people can't go there. If you go to Dubai, you will see gay people. If a guy wants to be gay and do whatever he wants to do with a full-grown man in his own house, I don't care. And you can tell. You might have a waiter's gay, whatever, etc. The only reason it's outlawed is not to stop a full-grown man meeting a full-grown man and doing what he decides to do. It's outlawed to prevent it bleeding into society and affecting the culture where the children are affected. That's why it's outlawed. And I'm not saying it should be outlawed in America, but what I'm saying is if you're not going to protect the innocence of children from any ideology, and if the ideology is deliberately targeting children because children are more impressionable and more capable of believing in things which simply aren't true, perhaps a man looking like a woman or vice versa, then that is a dangerous ideology that should be very closely examined.
Well, if you're not going to protect children, or if you're going to encourage women to fight your wars, why have a society in the first place?
Well, this is another
thing. Isn't the whole point of society to protect women and
children?
children?
You know what's really interesting? I argued this point once. They were talking about how the West is a patriarchy and it's so terrible to be a woman in the West. And I'm like, well, where's better to be a woman then? If it's not the West, please tell me. Pick another country besides America where you'd rather be a woman. It's garbage to begin with, but you're saying, America's a patriarchy and Americans are all misogynistic. And men are so bad and women have been oppressed since the beginning of time. It's always been a patriarchy. If that's true, why don't women fight our wars? Think about it. We can get the women of our country and the women of another country and let them go die in a ditch. And us men can just sit around being patriarchs. Why do we have to go die? Why do we have to go get our legs blown off? No, because we're a patriarchy. Women can go suffer. Or do the women get to stay at home and we go suffer? How is it a patriarchy, right? So that's garbage to begin with. But I think genuinely, to go back to that point, any ideology which is waking up and saying, our worldview is so extreme, the only way we can truly ensure it exists into the future is to find the most susceptible people on the planet to program and attack their minds, children. I think that that's a destructive ideology and should be very closely looked at. And it doesn't matter if it's LGBTQ or anything else. I think if you sit children down and pump propaganda into their brain, and that's the only way you can get what you want, then there's probably something wrong with your ideas because you're afraid to challenge them with a grown adult. You don't want a fair fight. You understand? They don't want a fair fight. They want to sit with a child who has no idea what he's talking about and tell him that men are women and women are men and vice versa, and just completely confuse the poor child because they don't want a fair fight against a rational adult. And that's scary.
It doesn't seem a huge improvement over, say, ISIS to me.
Absolutely. That's how do you convince somebody to blow themselves up? Well, you find a young man, teenage boy, and you program his mind. Exactly. And it's exactly the same thing. They don't try and convince an older man to blow himself up because he's going to sit there and go, well, why don't you blow yourself up? And then there's an argument. You go find a young, susceptible person, right? And that's what's so scary about all of it. And it's also kind of funny that like this whole LGBTQ thing is also linked to the patriarchy, also linked to all this other garbage and all these other false narratives and false ideas. And it's these people who are attacking me saying I'm dangerous for women because I'm a misogynist. You're dangerous for women for pretending men are women. You're more dangerous for women than I am. I'm saying a man's a man's, a woman's a woman. You're saying that if I put a wig on, I could go punch women in the face in the boxing ring. Who's dangerous for women? It's insanity. And again, they have no virtue at all. They just weaponize garbage and attack you with it. But I do think that children have to at least be the bottom line for society. That's the future. And if you have children at home, you're raising them. And if you struggle to feed them, the government doesn't care. They are yours and they're your problem and your responsibility. And you deal with all of the stress and all the worry of them being out late at night and all the responsibility of taking care of them. And you went through hell for them to exist. You don't owe their minds to anybody else. You don't owe it. So there has to be a point where you stand up and say, no, I raised this child.
It's my child.
That's my child. It's not yours. Absolutely.
What do you make of Julian Assange?
I think that it's crazy. It's the number one way to shut up the BBC, that's for sure. To mention him. Say, oh, you're a journalist. You care about journalism, do you? You care about a fair and independent story. Why is Assange in Belmarsh? Very interesting.
What do they say?
They don't answer. They try and change subject. They always do. I did it. I stole it from the Azerbaijani president. He started it.
I saw that.
Yeah, it's great.
Do you know him?
I don't know him, but I've seen enough of his interviews to like him.
Me too.
Yeah, I like him. And this is what I'm saying about the world. There's so many places in the world where they still live very firmly in the real world. All of this garbage is just the result of the very simple, easy lives that we have. Inside the movie The Matrix, which I recommend you watch, the agents say, we tried to create a utopia for the human mind so that your mind is in a utopian state and your body can just be used. But the human mind rejects utopia. We created the world in 1999 at the pinnacle of human civilization before machines took over because the human mind needs struggle and it needs problems. Otherwise, it rejects it.
Yes.
And I kind of feel like there's a whole bunch of people trying to just find problems and find struggle in their lives because they don't have enough motivation to do something that's genuinely difficult, like, help people. But they can't live in this state of complete vegetation.
That's
so
right.
Then they wake up and say, oh, I'm oppressed. My pronouns. How much energy must it take to go through life trying to correct every person you interact with to call you Z? Think of the calories burnt. I can't think of a bigger waste of time. Think of the calories burnt. Every Starbucks employee, it's actually Z. Correct. You are a moron and you are just wasting so much energy. You could put that towards something beneficial. You could volunteer. You could go to the gym. There's so much more you could do with instead of walking around and talking about Z. You sound like a dumbass. But they're just finding struggle because they don't have any actual important struggle in their lives. And that's why it only exists in the decadent West.
Do you think the coming famine will change that?
Absolutely. I would argue that when the famine comes, I think all these feminists will look for a strong man of resource who is stoic, who has a good network, who's capable and important and respected. It's amazing how quickly feminism disappears. In fact, there's a podcast I did called Fresh and Fit. And I did this podcast in Miami, and I was arguing about gender roles with 7 girls. And during it, they were telling me that they can do anything a man can do, all the usual things, and they don't care, they don't need a man, all this garbage. And some crazy fan knocked on the door for me, and he had a gun. He knocked on the door. You should have seen the women, how quickly they became feminists when I had to go to that door. They all completely changed. Go, 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 go. Oh, the feminism's out the window. There's no feminists on the Titanic. There's no feminisms in a famine. There's no feminists at war. Where's the feminists? Go to war, right? I remember when Afghanistan, when we did that very well-planned, very thorough evacuation of Afghanistan, and all the schools that we opened for women got shut down by the Taliban. And I was having this conversation with someone, and I was saying, okay, well, you're an Afghan man, right? You've been hired by the Afghan Defense Force, and America's now left, and you have a meager wage, and America's left, and the Taliban are coming, and you're standing outside of the school with your AK, and they're coming with whatever they've got. And you're looking at the school going, do I really want girls to go to school that bad? Not really. Just put it down, you walk off. And this girl's like, yeah, but you know, it's really important. And I'm like, yeah, it is very important. I agree. Women should have education and right the education. Completely agree. But you're also saying here that men should die for it, which is fine. I'm not saying that that shouldn't be the case, but I'm saying that you should give men the respect they deserve for dying for your education. Because it's not the women who are going to defend that female school, it's the men. So if you're going to shit on men all day long and say we ain't worth anything until a war comes, and then you want us to go die? That's interesting. When the famine comes, the closer reality gets towards baseline survival, the closer we become towards our gender roles, because it's the only way we can be competitive. If you took 10 men and 10 women and stranded them on a desert island, the men would be men and the women would be women, because if they didn't, they would die. That's the bottom line. And I think that if you look at history, since the dawn of time, men were masculine, and also men, by and large, were generally ruling the society, not in an oppressive way, but in a protective way. And I think that that means that makes the society most competitive. And my argument for that is that if you name any society since the dawn of human time, men were protecting women, providing for women, and basically in charge of the society. And these are societies that never met. So it can't be an idea that spread. The Ming dynasty and the Aztecs, they're pretty far away. But that's how society was most effective. And when feminists argue with me and say, we need a society run by women, I say, well, that's never, ever happened.